I can still remember the smell of warm bread that morning. It was a mix of comfort and pain, like life was rubbing in my face everything I couldn't have. The aroma spilled out onto the cold sidewalk, drifting through the glass door of the bakery, and my daughters, Lucy and Abby, stared inside with wide, sparkling eyes. They were hungry, and once again, I had nothing to give them that they truly deserved. The snow from the night before still clung to the corners of the street. My fingers ached inside my thin gloves, and the worn soles of my boots let the cold in as if I were barefoot. I tried to smile to hide the heartache, but the smile wouldn't come. Lucy squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mommy, do you think we could just share one piece of bread today?" Those words pierced through me like a thorn. It wasn't fair. They were only 7. They should be asking for toys, laughing loudly, stumbling through the snow, not begging to split a piece of plain bread. But there we were, me, standing in front of the bakery, pretending to be strong. I took a deep breath, pulled the door open with a kind of forced determination, and stepped inside with them. The warmth hit my face like a hug I didn't feel worthy of. The air smelled of baked dough, burnt sugar, and fresh coffee. It was one of those places that seemed cozy, until you realized you couldn't afford to be there. I went straight to the shelf with the cheapest bread. I picked up one, just one, and even then I hesitated. I walked to the counter, the girls clinging to me. They looked around like they were standing in the middle of a fairy tale, but their story was different. "Is that all?" the cashier asked without even looking me in the eye. I nodded. I pulled out the coins I had counted at least 5 times in the pocket of my coat, coins mixed with fragile hope. "You're short. 87 cents, she said bluntly. I swallowed hard, looked at the bread, then at my girls. I could see the disappointment slowly filling their eyes like a fog. "Can you take this one out of the bag?" I asked, pointing at the only loaf. She looked at me with a mix of impatience and disdain, took the bread and tossed it back into the basket. I apologized. I don't even know why. Maybe it was just the instinct of someone who had spent years trying not to be a bother, even when everything hurt. I held my daughter's hands and turned to leave. Just as we reached the door, the sound of it opening made me pause. A man walked in. Dark wool coat, leather scarf, steady steps. The kind of person no one dared ignore. Even the usual city noise seemed to quiet around him. I didn't notice him much at first. I was too busy trying to swallow the lump in my throat. But a few steps later, I heard another voice. Gentle, firm, unexpected. "Excuse me, could you put that bread back in the bag?" I turned slowly. The cashier looked confused. The man, him, was pointing to the bread I had just given back. "I'll pay for it," he added without hesitation. I didn't understand. My first instinct was to decline. "That's not necessary, sir." "Really, thank you, but it's just a loaf of bread," he interrupted with a soft smile. "Sometimes a loaf of bread changes more than we think." I looked into his eyes for the first time. There was something there that caught me off guard. It wasn't pity. It was something harder to describe. A look from someone who had once gone without, and now could see that same emptiness in others. The cashier, flustered, didn't just bag the loaf. She added 2 sweet rolls as well. The girl's eyes lit up. I nearly cried. All I could manage was a faint, "Thank you." He simply nodded as if to say, "It's okay." We walked out of the bakery in silence. The girls held the little bag like it was a treasure, and to them it was. As we walked, I noticed he had also stepped outside and was a bit behind us, but he didn't follow. He just watched for a few seconds before turning in another direction. And for some reason, that glance stayed with me. We got home. A small room we rented in the back of an old house. The smell of mold now mixed with the sweetness of the bread. The girls sat on the bed, opened the bag carefully, and began eating like they were tasting something sacred. And in a way they were. I stood still watching. My heart heavy, my mind spinning. Who was that man? Why did he do that? What did he see in me? There was no time for daydreaming. I had to get to my first job of the day, cleaning offices downtown. After that, I'd help at a laundromat. At night, I worked as a waitress in a small diner. 3 jobs, 3 shifts, and still barely enough for the basics. But that day, something shifted. It wasn't just about the bread. It was the gesture, the pause, the look. The next day, when I came back from the laundromat, I found a bag at our door. Groceries. Fruit, rice, milk. Nothing fancy, but everything essential. And inside, a handwritten card. May this Christmas have a little more peace. For you, for them, a friend. I sat down on the floor by the door and cried. The kind of cry I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. I didn't know what it meant. Whether it was just a random act of kindness, a Christmas gift from a generous stranger, or if maybe life was about to change. But in that moment, what mattered most was this. For the first time in a long time, someone had truly seen me. The next day, I woke up with a strange feeling, like the world had gotten a little out of place overnight. The kind of feeling you don't know if it's a premonition, or just accumulated exhaustion trying to warn you that you need to stop. But stopping wasn't an option. I had to get up, make coffee with what was left from the donation, and get the girls ready for school. The milk from the bag, probably the most expensive one on the shelf, was still cold. The rice, the fruit, the whole wheat bread. It was like someone had shopped thinking of us. Every detail. I didn't know his name. I wasn't sure if it was the same man from the bakery, but my heart told me it was. That look, that gesture. It was like he had seen not only my situation, but what I was feeling inside, the kind of pain that doesn't show in anyone's eyes. The girls went off to school with full stomachs and smiles on their faces that I hadn't seen in months. Lucy still had a piece of the sweet bread tucked in her coat pocket, as if it were a good luck charm. I headed straight to work. On the way, I ran through all the possibilities in my head. Who could have left the bag? Would there be more? Or was this too much already? But on the third night, it happened again. This time the bag was inside a larger box. And inside it, along with the food, were winter clothes for the girls, new items, with tags in their exact sizes. There were also 2 little red coats with furry hoods, and a note short, "They deserve more than just warmth. They deserve dignity." I sat on the edge of the bed holding the note. My mind couldn't keep up with what I was feeling. It was as if time had slowed down just to let me breathe. Who was this man? Why was he doing this? And how did he know so much? Even their exact shoe sizes? During dinner that night, while Lucy was telling me about her day at school, and Abby showed me a drawing of what seemed to be a chocolate castle, I noticed something that gave me chills. For the first time in a long while. They were living like children. Laughing, dreaming, being children, and I was there, watching it happen. And it was that same day that I saw him again. I left the restaurant at 10 p.m. The snow was falling lightly and silently. The streetlights reflected on the frozen puddles, creating a golden path on the asphalt. While I waited for the bus, pulling my scarf up to my nose, I saw a black car parked across the street. It wasn't just any car. It was one of those sleek sedans you only see in front of 5-star hotels. The door opened slowly, and there he was, even under the cold. Distant light of the street lamp, I recognized that look. The same one from the bakery, the same one that I felt watching me, but without invading. He crossed the street slowly, hands in the pockets of his coat, and stopped about 3 steps away from me. "Sorry to appear like this. Again," he said with a calm, almost deep voice. It took me a few seconds to respond. "It's you, isn't it? The man from the bread, from the bag, the coats." He made a subtle nod, neither confirming nor denying. But that silence said everything. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" He took a deep breath, looked at the sky, then back at me. "Because one day, someone did this for me, and I never managed to repay that person. So, I decided to pay it forward." We stood in silence. The wind whistled through the buildings. My eyes filled without warning. It wasn't sadness. It was gratitude, mixed with a confusion I couldn't name. "And why me?" I asked, almost in a whisper. He hesitated, then answered, "Because you didn't ask. And still, you didn't give up, because I saw you trying to hide the pain just so they wouldn't see it. Because you didn't feel ashamed of not having, and still had the dignity to thank. It was like someone had opened a window inside me." Those words pierced through everything I believed about myself. And for a moment I felt seen, truly seen. He extended his hand. "Alexander Harris." It took me a moment to process. That name sounded familiar, and then it clicked. Of course, it sounded familiar. He was the president of the Harrison Kerber Hotel Group. I had seen his face in a magazine at the newsstand. "Caroline Miller," I said, shaking his hand carefully, as if afraid to break that connection. "Caroline," he repeated, as if tasting the name with respect. "I didn't come here to embarrass you. I just wanted to know if you're doing okay. I'm better than I've been in a long time," I answered. And I was honest. He smiled with his eyes. "Good, because there's more." I furrowed my brow. More? A Christmas gift early. But if you'll allow me, this time I'd like to hand it to you myself. I blinked a few times, surprised. What is it? Do you trust me? The question hung in the air like a choice. Part of me wanted to step back, protect the girls, keep my distance. But there was another part, a quieter part, that said, "Yes, I trust you." He nodded and motioned to the car. The driver stepped out and opened the trunk. From there, Alexander pulled out 2 child-sized backpacks, identical, with snowflake designs and little bear keychains, and a third bag, filled with toys and illustrated books. But what really moved me was the last item, a small but live Christmas tree, with roots wrapped in white cloth and a golden bow on top. "I thought every home deserves a tree," he said. I hugged that tree as if it were a child. I couldn't say anything. I just smiled, crying in silence, as if receiving far more than I could ever give back. Alexander then said goodbye, without expecting thanks. He just said, "We'll be in touch. There are still things I'd like to do, but no rush, one step at a time." I stood there, watching the car disappear around the corner, my hands holding the base of the tree. The snow fell slowly, as if the world were trying to wrap this night in a sacred silence. I got home and woke the girls up. Still groggy, they cheered as if it were Christmas morning. We decorated the corner of the room with the tree, hung the bear keychains as ornaments, and that night, even without a feast, even without luxury gifts, we felt something that had been gone for a long time. Belonging. But while they slept again, clutched to their new stuffed bears, I stayed awake, with one question that wouldn't leave me. Why would someone like Alexander Harris care so much about someone like me? Christmas Eve arrived without snow. The sky was overcast, but the city still looked dressed in light. The streets had a different kind of glow, as if, just for one night, the world was trying to remember how to be more human. And that day, I didn't have a shift at the laundromat or the restaurant. For the first time in weeks, I would be home with the girls. They spent the entire morning excited, even though they already knew their gifts had come early. Abby tied red bows on the stuffed bears, and Lucy drew little stars on paper and taped them above the tree. It was probably the simplest tree on the block, maybe even in the city, but it was ours. And that was enough. While they played, I found myself staring at the phone. Alexander had left me a card with a handwritten number, saying I could call if I ever needed anything. I hadn't called. Out of pride? Maybe. Or maybe because I didn't want to break the magic. His help had been so pure, I didn't want to turn it into dependence. Still, I thought about him. And it was that same day that I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. No neighbor would drop by, no distant relative. I opened the door cautiously, and there he was, standing on the sidewalk, holding 2 wrapped boxes and a thick paper bag with Harrington's Bakery, printed in gold letters, Alexander Harris. He wore a dark blue sweater, a gray scarf, and that same calm, steady look as always. I felt strangely at ease seeing him, as if he wasn't a stranger, as if he were already part of our story, even without asking to be. "Merry Christmas, Caroline," he said softly. I didn't think I'd see you again," I confessed, barely above a whisper. "I told you there'd be more, and I don't like breaking promises." I looked at the boxes, then back at him. "May I come in?" he asked respectfully. I nodded. The girls ran to the door the moment they saw him. Abby's eyes lit up. "It's the man from the tree," she shouted. Lucy, always the quieter one, just hid behind my leg, but she was smiling. Alexander knelt down and handed the girls the 2 boxes. "1 gift each, but you can only open them after dinner, okay?" They both nodded enthusiastically. While they got distracted with the ribbons, he handed me the bag. "I brought a few things for dinner. I thought maybe you'd like to have something special tonight." I opened it carefully. Inside were braided stuffed breads, candied fruits, a chocolate walnut cake, and a bottle of grape juice in a dark glass. Nothing over the top, but everything had been chosen with such care. It made my chest tighten. I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything. Just accept it. Sometimes accepting is the hardest gift of all," he replied. We all sat together, the little room filled with scents that weren't part of our usual life. The girls giggled with crumbs on their fingers. And Alexander? He just watched, as if that simplicity meant more to him than any hotel banquet ever could. "Can I ask you something?" he said, looking at me. I nodded, still busy wiping Abby's mouth. "What was your dream? Before all this?" I choked a little inside. No one had asked me that in a long time. Maybe not since I was a teenager. I paused for a few seconds. I wanted to open a little cafe with books, a quiet place where people could eat and rest their minds. He smiled. That makes sense. You seem like the kind of person who brings comfort, even in silence. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, trying to hold on to those words like a rare compliment. When it was time to open the gifts, the girls tore the wrapping like they were uncovering treasure. Abby got a bunny-shaped backpack with colored pencils and sticker-covered notebooks. Lucy received a blue dress with little embroidered stars and a box of watercolor paints. I read somewhere that she liked to draw, Alexander explained. How do you know so much about us? I asked. He looked at me for a moment, then answered with disarming honesty, because I listened. From that day at the bakery, I listened more than you think, and I wanted to understand before offering help. That night, he didn't stay long. When the girls started yawning and the clock neared midnight, he stood up. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, he said. This was by far the most genuine Christmas I've had in years. I walked him to the door. Can I ask you something now? I murmured before he said goodbye. Of course. Why all this mud for me? Alexander looked up at the dark sky for a second, then back at me, his eyes gentle and steady. Because the world needs to be reminded that dignity isn't about bank accounts. It's about courage. And you, Caroline, you have more courage than any executive I've ever met. His words washed over me like a warm wave, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could be more than a survivor. Alexander left, and the silence he left behind was a good one. The kind of silence that doesn't weigh you down, that soothes. I closed the door. The girls had fallen asleep on the couch. The lights on the tree blinked slowly. I sat down on the floor beside them, holding the gift wrap like it was a letter from another world, a world where someone finally had believed in me. But what I didn't know was that gesture, that simple dinner, that blue dress, were only the beginning of something much greater, because Alexander hadn't just brought a Christmas gift. He had sparked a whole new story, and I had no idea yet where it would lead. Life began to move at a different pace after that Christmas. In some way, Alexander's presence felt like a lighthouse, guiding us back to the surface, where the light was a little brighter and the air a little easier to breathe. I knew I couldn't rely on him forever, but even so, something inside me wanted to understand more. I wanted to know who he really was, why he was doing all of this, because in my life, people had only helped when they had something to gain. I no longer knew how to tell the difference between a sincere gesture and mere convenience, and it was on a rainy afternoon in January that I got the chance. Alexander invited me for coffee in the lobby of one of his hotels. I hesitated before saying yes. The fear of the unknown always lingered. But the desire to understand what he truly wanted from us weighed heavier. The girls were at school, and I knew this was the moment. When I arrived at the hotel, the doorman greeted me with a smile that felt rehearsed. The marble staircase reflected the soft lighting, and the sound of my footsteps mixed with the whisper of rain against the windows. The place was luxurious, but not in a cold way. It felt warm, like a big home. And in that moment, the comfort of that space stood in direct contrast to the chill outside. Alexander was already seated at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him. He stood up as soon as he saw me. Caroline, he said with a genuine smile, please sit. I've been waiting for you. I sat down, still a little tense, and he handed me a warm cup. The steam rose gently into the air. There was something calming about him, as if he carried a kind of peace I had never known. How are the girls? He asked. They're doing well. Excited about school. Lucy's loving her art classes. Abby, well, she's always been quieter, but there's something special in her. I see a sparkle in their eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. They're growing, Alexander. He paused, sipping his coffee. And how are you? I hesitated. I didn't know what to say. I was tired, yes, but it wasn't just that. In many ways, I felt lost. But something in his eyes made me want to be honest. I don't really know, honestly. I'm not sure I've ever really known how to just be, how to live, how to accept. I think I've spent so much time trying to keep things under control for the girls' sake that I've kind of lost sight of who I am. Alexander listened carefully, never rushing to interrupt, and I kept going. I've worked so hard just to keep us going, to keep a roof over our heads, that I haven't had a moment to look inward. I've always been the strong woman, the one who doesn't complain, the one who fixes everything on her own. But deep down, I don't think I've ever really known what it feels like to have someone beside me. Someone who sees who I am, not just what I do. I stopped talking for a moment, shame creeping up on me. But Alexander didn't look at me with judgment. He was just present, listening, and I don't know if that's a good thing, or just the result of living on autopilot for too long. He gave a small smile. Caroline, you don't have to be strong all the time. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to let yourself be seen. There's no shame in that. His words stayed with me, like they were touching a place inside me I didn't even know was still alive, as if he somehow understood a pain I'd never spoken out loud. The pain of carrying the world alone, never asking for help. The weight of being the pillar when all you really want is to be held. I know you're not asking for anything, Caroline, but maybe it's time to accept something. To accept that there's more waiting for you than just what you've been forced to endure. I looked at him, trying to grasp what he was saying. I wasn't asking for anything. I didn't need anything. But the way he spoke made me wonder if, maybe, there was a different path ahead of me. I don't know if I'm capable of that, I murmured. I've never known how to live for myself. Maybe it's time to find out, he said softly. You already give so much to everyone around you. Maybe now it's time to start giving that same care to yourself. Maybe it's time to let someone else care for you too. I felt vulnerable but not uncomfortable. In fact, I felt like something had been lifted, like for the first time, someone saw me without wanting to take something from me. He just wanted me to be okay. And the girls? I asked, searching for a way to shift the focus away from me. He let out a soft laugh. I have a surprise for them. Something simple, but I think they'll love it. Deep down, I knew that Alexander's surprises went far beyond material gifts. He wasn't just offering help. He was offering something deeper. The possibility of a different future. One where maybe I wouldn't have to carry it all alone anymore. When I left the hotel, the strangeness had faded. Something inside me had started to believe, maybe for the first time, that things could really get better. That this wasn't just a passing dream. That Alexander's kindness wasn't some fleeting charity. I still didn't know exactly what the future held for us, but at least now, I knew I could be part of something greater. Something that wasn't only about sacrifice and survival. After all, who was I really? Maybe it was time to finally find out. I was still trying to make sense of everything that had happened over the past few weeks when Alexander called. His voice on the other end of the line was gentle but direct. Caroline, would you be able to meet me tomorrow afternoon? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Something important. I didn't ask what it was. I just said yes. The truth is, my intuition already knew. Whatever he was about to say would change something. And that scared me. That afternoon, I left the girls with the neighbor and walked to the address he sent. An elegant but discreet building on a tree-lined street in the old part of town. The cold had started to settle in again. The trees were bare, their branches like thin hands pointing toward the sky, and my heart was restless, as if it could feel the weight of a decision I hadn't made yet. When I arrived, a receptionist guided me to the top floor. The room where Alexander waited had glass walls and a breathtaking view. It felt like the entire city fit within that frame. Tiny cars, glowing lights, people moving back and forth, everything in constant motion. I felt small, but not invisible. He greeted me with a calm smile. Though his eyes said something else, they were alert, intense, as if they were waiting for my soul to arrive, not just my body. Thank you for coming. Caroline, he said, offering me a seat. I know your schedule is tight, so I'll be brief. I nodded, trying to steady the nervous flutter growing inside me. These past few months, I've been following not just your story, but who you are, your strength, your dignity, and more than anything, your way of caring for people. And that is rare, very rare. I just stared at him, unsure of what to say. I'm about to open a new hotel. It's in the final stages of construction. It's going to be a model space, a concept we're still shaping, but with a very different focus, people. And for that, I need someone who represents this concept from the very beginning. Someone with integrity, empathy, structure, and heart. And I thought of you. My stomach flipped. I was sure I had misunderstood. I'm sorry. Are you offering me a job? He smiled. Yes, I want you to be the head house manager of the new hotel. You'd oversee the housekeeping team, coordinate apartment prep, manage daily routines. You'd live on site, have full meals included, complete support for your daughters, and a stable salary, with the possibility of bonuses as the project grows. My hands started to sweat. It was too much to take in at once. My body wanted to say yes before my mind could even process it, but I couldn't react. All I could say was, I've never done anything like that. I've never managed anything. I'm just... Caroline. He interrupted gently but firmly. You already manage 3 jobs, 2 daughters, and an entire life with more competence than many executives I've met. The only difference is that no one's handed you a badge yet. Those words hit hard, because for the first time someone was offering me a place. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. I don't have a degree, I murmured. But you have character, and that's worth more than any diploma. The rest we can teach you. And if you want to finish your education, we can help with that too. That's not a barrier. It's just one more step. I stayed quiet. Emotion rose like a wave, catching me off guard. And the girls? I asked. I've already reserved a comfortable suite in the hotel for you. 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a kitchen. There's a nearby school with open enrollment. If you'd like, I can go with you to make sure everything is set up for them. It couldn't be real. It felt like a dream. Or a movie. Why are you doing this? I whispered, eyes filled with tears. Why, me? Alexander stood and walked to the window. He was quiet for a moment before answering. Because you represent the kind of world I want to help build. Because you don't know it, but you've already changed something in me. And because you deserve more. It's that simple. My eyes filled, but I didn't cry. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a job. It was about giving back to myself. Something I'd lost long ago. The right to dream of a future. You don't have to decide now, he said, sitting again. But if you want it, the hotel opens in 30 days. And the position is yours. All you have to do is say yes. I left without giving an answer. I just promised I'd think about it. And I did, for days. I walked the streets like someone lost in a maze of memories. I replayed the nights of extreme exhaustion, the times I fainted on the subway from hunger, the nights I prayed without believing in miracles anymore. I thought of the girls, of the drawings Lucy taped to the walls, of Abby's dreamy eyes. I thought of the Christmas tree, the sweet rolls at the bakery, that first gesture. Alexander wasn't saving me. He was offering me a ladder. All I had to do was find the courage to climb the first step. The following week, I put on my best coat. It was still old, but clean, and went back to that glass building. Alexander greeted me with a look that already seemed to know my answer. If you still want it to be me, I began, my voice shaking. Then, I'm in, he smiled. A smile of relief, but also certainty. Welcome, Caroline. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged to something, to a new beginning. What I didn't know yet was that this hotel wouldn't just change my life. It was about to change Alexander's too. The first time I walked through the revolving doors of the new hotel, holding Lucy and Abby's hands, it felt like we were stepping into another planet. Everything inside was different. The muffled sound of footsteps on the thick carpet, the soft glow of crystal chandeliers hanging like stars from the ceiling, the subtle scent of lavender mixed with the freshness of new wood. The girls were mesmerized. Abby pointed at every detail like she was exploring a castle. Lucy, always more observant, studied the faces of the staff and whispered questions like, "Do they live here too, Mommy? Or do you think we'll have princess beds?" I didn't know how to answer, because deep down, it still felt like a dream. Alexander was waiting for us in the lobby. He wore a dark suit without a tie, as if trying to appear less CEO and more human. When he saw the girls, he crouched down to their level with a warm smile. "Welcome, young ladies. Your suite is ready, with everything you asked for." And one surprise. They ran ahead with the receptionist, who already knew their names. I stayed behind, looking at Alexander with a mix of gratitude and nervousness. "It all feels so big," I murmured. "It's just a building, Caroline. What really matters is what you make of it." We rode up to the 5th floor together. The suite looked like something from a magazine in a waiting room. 2 bedrooms with large windows, a small living room with a linen couch, a round wooden table, and a fully equipped kitchen. But what moved me most were the details. A vase of fresh flowers on the table, a children's painting framed on the wall, and little wooden plaques on each. Bedroom door, Lucy's room, and Abby's castle. I sat on the edge of the bed. It was too soft, almost like it was trying to hold me in a way I didn't yet know how to accept. The next day, I started officially. Alexander introduced me to the team as the head of housekeeping, with a natural ease that left me breathless. The stares were mixed. Some curious, others clearly skeptical. After all, I didn't look like an executive. I didn't talk like one either. But there was one thing none of them could take from me: life experience. "Good morning, everyone," I said in my first meeting. "I didn't come here to be the boss. I came to work with you. I've been on your side, feeling the weight on your back and the looks of contempt from people who've never made a bed in their life. So I'm here with respect, but also with responsibility. What we build here will reflect in every guest who walks through these doors. So let's do it right, with care, with integrity." The silence that followed was thick, but slowly I saw some heads nodding. I started by visiting every department: laundry, room cleaning, suite preparation, in-room service, amenities. I made sure to be involved, to wear the uniform, to roll up my sleeves, because for me, leading was never about giving orders. It was about serving, with purpose. In the first week, I reorganized the delivery system, created a suggestion notebook so the staff could propose improvements, redesigned the shift communication process to avoid the usual small errors that nobody questioned before. Alexander observed from a distance. He didn't interfere. He just supported. Sometimes I'd find little notes on my desk. "Your way of leading is rare. Keep going." Or, "The team feels lighter already. That's your doing." Over time, I realized the hotel was taking shape. Not just in furniture and walls, but in relationships. The cook started baking extra cookies for the girls. The security guards greeted them by name. And the same employees who once looked at me with indifference now gave me warm, genuine smiles. But the deepest transformation was in me. For the first time, I had a place. A roof that was more than shelter. A space where my opinion mattered. Where my presence had weight. Nights felt different too. I slept peacefully. Fear no longer woke me. Lucy and Abby decorated their own rooms with drawings, string lights and little cutouts taped to the walls. At night, they read to me, laughed together, hugged me tight before bed, and from time to time, Alexander would appear. Never intrusive, always respectful. Sometimes he'd have lunch with the staff in the cafeteria, sitting just like anyone else. Other times, he'd bump into the girls in the courtyard and listen to their stories with a kind of attention I had never seen in any man. He had a way of being fully present, and it caught me off guard. One day, after one of his visits, Abby asked me, "Mommy, is Mr. Alexander like an angel?" I smiled, surprised. "Why do you think that?" "Because he listens with his heart." That sentence stayed with me for days. One evening, after I put the girls to bed, I stepped out onto the balcony of our suite. The city sparkled below, and for the first time I felt peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of purpose. There was still a lot to be done. Many adjustments in the hotel, the systems, the team, but what was already clear was that this place was more than a job. It was a fresh start. It was where I could finally bloom. What I didn't know yet was that the hotel was transforming Alexander too. And that despite all the power he held, he was also learning, through us, what it meant to truly have a home. Life at the hotel began to unfold like music. Each shift a note, each encounter a rhythm, and within that flow, something new started to emerge, something I couldn't quite name. But that showed itself softly in small gestures, lingering glances and quiet constancy. Alexander started showing up more often, not as the CEO of a hotel empire, but as someone who, slowly, was becoming part of our everyday life. Sometimes he brought illustrated books for Lucy, knowing her love for art. Other times, he helped Abby with giant puzzles in the lobby. And he always did it without rush, without forcing anything, just being there, fully present, attentive, kind. The staff no longer found it strange. Some even commented that he seemed happier since the hotel opened. And in a way, I knew that was true. There was something in Alexander that was changing too, as if beneath all the layers of discipline and control, he was rediscovering the simple joy of belonging. One evening, after a long shift, I walked through the courtyard and saw him sitting on a wooden bench. Abby was asleep in his lap, and Lucy was quietly drawing beside him. The scene stopped me in my tracks. He saw me and brought a finger to his lips, signaling silence, then gestured toward the sky. The stars had just begun to peek through the early evening haze. I sat beside them, and for a few minutes no one said a word. The silence between us was light, as if it already said everything. "They're incredible, Caroline," he murmured. "I don't know how you managed to keep so much tenderness alive through so much hardship." I took a deep breath. I just knew I couldn't let them lose their childhood. Even when I was falling apart inside, they kept me standing. He looked down at Abby, peacefully asleep. And you? Who kept you standing? The question struck like a stone gently thrown. I stared at my hands for a few seconds. I don't know, maybe just a stubborn hope that someday all of this would make sense. He nodded, like someone who understood more than they were saying. That night, he walked us back to our suite. The girls were so comfortable with him, by now that they didn't even ask if he could stay. They just took his hand. Lucy wanted to show him her latest drawing. Abby wanted him to taste a cookie she'd helped make with the kitchen staff. I watched it all from a distance, trying to understand what was happening between us. After they fell asleep, he stood on the balcony for a while. I walked over. "You don't have to stay, Alexander. It's getting late." He looked out over the city lights. "It doesn't bother me to be here. On the contrary, it feels good." I stayed quiet. And then, for the first time, I said what had been stuck inside me for weeks. "I'm afraid." He turned to me gently. "Afraid of what?" "Of getting used to this. Of believing I can have something good, and then losing it all again." He didn't answer right away. He just stepped closer, slowly. "Caroline, you're not alone anymore, and this isn't something I plan to take away tomorrow, or next week. I'm here because I want to be, and as long as you'll have me, I'll stay." It wasn't an empty promise. It was a quiet declaration of presence, not from someone who demands space, but from someone building it, patiently, with care. From that night on, things changed, without being said, without being planned. On weekends, Alexander started joining us for lunch. He took the girls on small walks through the courtyard. He bought Lucy a set of professional watercolors and helped Abby plant sunflowers in tiny pots. And I began to let myself feel. I felt joy in our daily rhythms. I felt safe watching him with the girls. And the scariest part, I felt his absence when he wasn't around. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It wasn't reckless attraction. It was something much rarer, the slow building of deep affection. The staff began to notice too. One of them even joked, "Mr. Harris smiles more these days, but only when you're around, Caroline." I just smiled, pretending not to understand. Then came his birthday. I found out by accident, overhearing a hallway conversation. Alexander didn't plan to celebrate. He told the team it was just another ordinary day. But to us, it wasn't. The girls decided to surprise him. Lucy made a giant card with a drawing of all of us sitting on the courtyard bench. Abby wrote, in her still clumsy handwriting, "You're like a hug from the sky." That evening, he arrived at the hotel around 8. When he stepped into our suite, the lights were off. "Anyone home?" he called out, smiling. And then, the girls lit a small cake they'd helped bake with the kitchen staff. A simple cake, but full of care. On top, it read, "Happy New Chapter, Uncle Alexander." He stood there, clearly moved. The girls ran to hug him, and I stood off to the side, watching. "All this was their idea?" he asked. I nodded. "They wanted you to know you're special, that you're part of our lives." He looked at me, and there was something new in his gaze, a different kind of light. That night, we ate together. We laughed, we talked, and for the first time, we took a picture. The 4 of us. Me, the girls, and Alexander, together. We weren't officially a family, but we were a family, even without a label, even without a name. A family that was forming, one gesture at a time, and I didn't yet know where it would lead. But deep down, something whispered. Maybe the home I've always searched for wasn't a place. Maybe it was this. The small hands in mine, the silence that doesn't weigh, the love that doesn't demand, the presence that doesn't leave. After the girls' surprise, Alexander began coming to the hotel more often, but in a different way. It wasn't a visit anymore. It was a presence, a quiet extension of our routine. And at the same time, I noticed something changing in him, not in how he dressed or spoke, but in his eyes. Alexander was starting to let himself be affected. He used to walk in with perfect posture, precise speech, a distant gaze. Now, he arrived unannounced, left the tie at home, accepted Abby's slightly burnt cookies without complaint, and carried Lucy's drawings in his leather briefcase like they were official documents. One cold afternoon in March, Lucy asked me a question I wasn't expecting. "Mommy, does Uncle Alexander have a birthday?" I smiled. "Of course he does, sweetheart. Everyone does. Does he celebrate it?" I paused for a moment. "I don't think so. He says he prefers not to make a big deal out of it." "But why?" I didn't know how to answer. And maybe neither did he. Over the next few days, the girls started whispering plans. They talked with the kitchen staff, hid drawings, cut colorful paper, and held secret meetings with a level of excitement I hadn't seen since Christmas. When I asked about it, Abby just said, "It's a heart secret." Deep down, I already knew, and without saying much, I started to help. On his birthday, the hotel was quiet. Alexander had spent the morning in meetings and was expected back in the afternoon. The girls helped me decorate the suite's living room with simple balloons and a small, craft paper sign that read, "Happy New Chapter." We placed white flowers on the table, lit scented candles, and prepared a small spread of the foods we knew he liked. Rye bread, fresh cheese, strawberries, chocolate cake with ganache, and a bottle of apple juice. The cake had been made by Lucy, with help from the hotel's pastry chef. It was a little lopsided, uneven, but full of love. At 7 p.m., he arrived. I opened the door before he even knocked. He had a book tucked under his arm and tired eyes. "Hey," he said, taking off his coat. "I'm exhausted." "Then come in. Tonight, you don't have to think about anything." He smiled, a little curious. When he stepped into the room and saw everything, he froze. The girls were hiding behind the sofa. As soon as he crossed the doorway, they jumped out. Surprise! Alexander jumped slightly, then laughed. A real, almost boyish laugh. He placed a hand over his heart, visibly touched. "All of this was you?" Abby ran to him with a paper party hat. "It's yours." Lucy made the drawings. He put it on without hesitation. Lucy handed him a gift. A box made of cardboard, painted blue, filled with drawings she and Abby had made. Scenes from everyday life at the hotel. The Christmas tree, the garden bench, the balcony at night. Alexander opened it carefully. When he saw what was inside, his eyes filled with emotion. He didn't try to hide it. He stayed silent for several seconds, touching the pages as if they were something sacred. "This is the best gift I've ever received," he said, voice husky. The girls beamed. Then we sat down to eat. We laughed, toasted with juice, shared stories. It felt like a family dinner. No etiquette, no expectations. And at some point, after the girls ran off to play, Alexander and I found ourselves alone on the balcony. He stood there, gazing at the city with a distant look. "How long has it been since you celebrated your birthday?" I asked. He sighed. "Since my parents died." His answer came like a whispered memory. I was 26, already taking over part of the family business. And suddenly I was alone, with a massive company in my hands, expectations from every side, and no real hugs anywhere near. Since then, my birthday just became a reminder. A reminder of what? He turned toward me. That everything I built didn't mean anything if I had no one to share it with. We stood in silence. A breeze passed by, making the candles flicker. "And now?" I asked softly. "Now, I feel like I'm getting something back. Not with parties or gifts, but with this, with them, with you." My chest tightened. Alexander stepped closer, and not to touch me, but to say something no man had ever said to me before. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be seen. Not as a businessman, but as a person." I closed my eyes for a second. It was all so intense, and yet so simple. We went back to the living room. The girls were already sleepy. Abby was curled up on the couch, and Lucy leaned her head on my shoulder. Alexander bent down to say goodnight. "Thank you, my sweet girls. This was one of the most important days of my life." "We love you, Uncle Alexander," Abby mumbled, eyes nearly closed. He didn't answer. He just kissed her forehead gently. That night, after he left, I stood for a while looking at the table, the half-eaten cake, the colorful papers, the little hat left behind. It wasn't a fancy dinner. It wasn't a corporate event. But it was the moment Alexander let himself come home, maybe for the first time in his life. And the most remarkable part was that home now included us, me, Lucy, Abby, even if none of us knew quite what to call it yet. The weeks following Alexander's birthday moved with a kind of quiet that felt almost suspicious. The hotel was thriving. The staff worked with lightness. The guests praised not just the service, but the atmosphere. It was as if everyone sensed that this place carried something more than luxury. It carried soul. But then the meetings began multiplying. Alexander started taking phone calls during dinner. He disappeared for hours into video conferences. The expression on his face changed, from calm to a subtle, lingering tension. I noticed but didn't ask. I knew enough to sense something deeper was happening, and that it had more to do with values than spreadsheets. Until one morning, he asked to speak with me in his office. It was the first time we met there since I was hired. The glass walls now looked less transparent. The sky outside was gray, and the silence in the room felt heavier. "Caroline," he began, removing his glasses and setting them gently on the desk. "There's something I need to tell you, and I want you to hear it before anyone else." I nodded, trying to hide the chill that ran up my spine. The board of Harris & Cummins is pressuring for radical changes. They claim the management model we've built here is emotionally inefficient. They think we're overspending on staffing, on benefits, on processes that don't scale. That's the word they used. Scale, I repeated, not fully understanding. They want the hotel to grow fast, to run like the others, cut costs, outsource everything, replace people with systems. But what really bothers them is our human model. Our model? I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Yes, the fact that we've hired people with no formal background, that we've promoted single mothers, immigrants, people society often overlooks, that we treat our staff with the same care we give our guests. They call it operational fragility. I said nothing. First came anger, then fear. And what does that mean for us? Alexander leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers interlocked. It means they've given me two options. Either I cut all of this and standardize the hotel to match the old model, or I step down as director, hand control over to corporate, and let them run it their way. My stomach dropped. They want you to choose between values and profit. He nodded. And what are you going to do? The question came out before I could stop it. But it was honest, because I knew this moment would reveal who Alexander really was. He took a deep breath. I didn't get into this to build just another hotel. Caroline, I did this for you, for the girls, for the team, because I was tired of systems that crush people in the name of numbers. And now, I'm being tested. You already know the answer, I murmured. He looked at me. There was pain in his eyes. But there was something else too, a growing strength. I do, but it's a choice that takes courage. Because if I go through with it, I lose control of the holding. I lose funding, investors. I officially become a man alone with a vision. You'll never be alone, I replied without hesitation. He lowered his gaze, and for the first time I saw his eyes well with tears. I never wanted you or the girls to be caught in the middle of this. I've fought so hard to create a safe space for you, but now, I can't promise anything. If I leave, we lose the financial support of the company. We may have to shut the hotel down, start again from scratch. I stood slowly and walked toward him, not on impulse, but because I knew it was time to stand beside him the way he had once stood beside us. I touched his hand. If this place was built with truth, then it will survive. Maybe in a different form, maybe in a different building. But it's not the structure that matters, Alexander. It's what you put into it. He nodded, locking eyes with me. And if I asked you to come with me? If I walked away from all of this and wanted to start a new project somewhere else, would you come? The question hung in the air, as if time itself paused to listen. Of course I would, I said firmly. As long as the girls come with us, and as long as that somewhere else still has a soul. He smiled, relieved. Then let's do this our way. Even if it's hard, even if it hurts. 2 days later, Alexander called a meeting with the board. I wasn't there, but I heard what happened. They said he entered the room without slides, without charts, only a letter in his hand. He read it aloud, saying he didn't build this project to pad spreadsheets, but to restore dignity to those who serve. He refused to support any decision that dehumanized people in the name of efficiency. And finally, he submitted his resignation as president of Harris & Co. Silence, shock, divided reactions. But when he left that room, he was lighter than I'd ever seen him. He came back to the hotel, took off his jacket, sat in the staff cafeteria, and announced, "We're going to start something new, but this time from the ground up, our way." Some cried, others applauded. I just looked at him and saw a man whole, a man who didn't choose the easiest path, but the truest one. That night he found me on the balcony. "Are you ready to start over?" he asked, with that quiet smile I'd come to understand so well. I always was. I just didn't know it until now. And there, with the city glowing beneath us, life breathing quietly around us, and 2 little girls asleep in the next room, I realized something. What we build with soul, no one can tear down, even if the building changes, even if the name on the door is different. What we created was already home, and wherever there is truth, there will always be space to begin again. In the days following Alexander's resignation, the hotel entered a kind of limbo, not in terms of its practical function. We were still receiving guests, serving meals, delivering fresh laundry, offering warm smiles. But internally, everything felt suspended, that kind of silence that comes just before something big. The staff walked around like people waiting for the next page to turn. And I tried to keep things in order, without letting the growing fear inside show on my face. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon that Alexander called me into one of the vacant rooms at the hotel. He had turned it into a small makeshift headquarters. Maps on the wall, folders on the table, a whiteboard with ideas scribbled in marker. The strong smell of coffee filled the air. "Caroline," he began, eyes shining, "it's time to give a name to what we're building." I sat across from him, heart pounding. I want to start a new company, not just any company. A hotel chain built on a radically different concept. Hospitality as shelter, luxury as presence, service as human connection. And I want you to be my partner in this journey. For a second I thought I'd misheard. "Partner?" He nodded, steady and sure. "I can provide the initial investment, of course, but I don't want this to be mine. That wouldn't be fair. This project was born from what you showed me, from what you and the girls have taught me. I want its soul to carry your name too." Emotion rose in me like a tide. "I don't know anything about companies, Alexander, about being a partner in something. I don't understand markets or contracts. But you understand people," he said, "and no one can teach that." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, as if trying not to interrupt. Inside, the air felt thick with possibility. "And the name?" I asked, trying to steady my breathing. He smiled. "Hearth Hotels." Hearth, like the heart of a home. The warm center. Human warmth. Hearth. The word moved through me like a gentle embrace. "The headquarters will be here for now. But we'll find a location to build the first hotel from scratch. With everything we believe in. You'll lead operations. We'll design the values, the processes, the team, together. No inherited manuals, just lived experiences. Just truth." I was still trying to take it all in when he handed me an envelope. "Here's the partnership contract. Take your time to read it. No rush. But just so you know, you'll have decision-making power, a share of the profits, and full creative freedom to shape the environment you want. Because this place will be born from your story too." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. And there it was, and in black and white, my name. As co-founder. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath. And when I opened them, Alexander was looking at me, waiting for an answer. "I accept." That's what I said. No hesitation, no doubt. And in that moment, something within me woke up, as if I'd lived my whole life with a missing piece. And it had finally clicked into place. In the days that followed, we began meeting with architects, consultants, hospitality professionals, even former guests who agreed to give feedback. When the hotel team heard the news, the response was tearful, joyful, full of long hugs. Some asked to come with us, even if the new project would take months to build. Others offered to help however they could. Alexander rented a temporary office downtown to serve as the base for Hearth Hotels. We brought the girls along to see it. Lucy said it looked like an empty castle. Abby asked to decorate it with plants. And of course, her wish was granted. During our first week of planning, we co-wrote the company's manifesto. It was more than just a value statement. It was a declaration of identity. Here, the guest is not just a client. They're a human being. Here, the staff is not a number. They are part of the soul. Here, luxury means care. Time means presence. And true wealth is the bond we build with one another. And that's how we began. No sponsors, no shareholders, but with a conviction too large to fit in a spreadsheet. As the meetings unfolded, the bond between us grew in quiet ways. Alexander consulted me on everything. He listened, respected me, treated me as an equal, and slowly, I started to believe that the woman who once stood in front of a bakery with empty pockets had become someone who could now write her own story. As for the girls, they proudly began, telling people they worked at Mommy and Alexander's company. Lucy made drawings for the future hotel rooms. Abby put stickers on folders. And even though they were too young to fully understand what was happening, they could feel it. They could feel that something important was being born. One evening after a long meeting, Alexander came to me with a spark in his eye. "I've been thinking about something for the common area in our first hotel," he said. "A room with no clocks. Just books, soft music, herbal tea, floor cushions. A space where people can simply exist. No hurry. No role, just be." I smiled, like a pause for the heart. "Exactly," he said. "A pause for the heart." And so, between floor plans and flower pots, between budgets and bedtime drawings, between tight hugs and brave decisions, Hearth Hotels was born. It wasn't just a project. It was a purpose. And we, Alexander, me, Lucy, Abby, were building something that wasn't just for us, but for everyone who had ever felt invisible. The next step would be even more symbolic. But I didn't yet know that before the first grand opening, something would happen that would change not just the company's future, but the course of our lives. The construction of the first Hearth Hotel's location began on a secluded piece of land, surrounded by tall trees and a quiet little lake. When Alexander took me there for the first time, he simply said, "This is where the world can breathe differently." And he was right. There was a kind of serenity there that didn't exist in the fancy districts of major cities. It was a piece of earth where time seemed to slow down, where the wind spoke softly and birds flew without urgency. The project took months, and during that time, every decision was made from the heart. The rooms were designed with natural light, light-colored wood, cotton fabrics, and handcrafted touches by local artisans. The dining hall would be communal, with large round tables, a symbol of equality. The shared lounge would have potted plants, reading chairs, ambient music, and fresh brewed coffee. It was a construction of soul, not just stone and cement. The founding team was mostly made up of people from the previous hotel, people who had once been treated as invisible, and who now proudly wanted to be part of something that treated every person with dignity. The girls followed everything closely. Lucy created a magic map of the hotel, with little dots showing where smiles usually appear. Abby declared that she wanted to be the hug supervisor, and Alexander? Well, he seemed like a different man. During one meeting, a financial consultant suggested outsourcing the cleaning staff to cut costs. Alexander replied firmly, "Here, the people who clean also dream, and people who dream shouldn't be treated as a cost." That sentence spread through the halls, and quickly became a motto among the staff. Just before the official opening, we decided to host a soft launch, an invite-only evening just for friends and family. A symbolic moment to celebrate how far we'd come. The girls chose the menu for the small dinner. Caroline coordinated every detail with the team. And I just observed, from a distance, like someone who realizes the seed they planted had finally bloomed. That night, while everyone was caught up in laughter and memories, Alexander gently pulled me outside, toward the garden lit by tiny lights strung across the tree branches. The ground was covered with crisp autumn leaves. The sky was clear, stars glowing like forgotten beacons. He held my hands gently. "I know this could be enough. The company, the new beginning, the team, the mission. But there's still something missing." My heart quickened. "What's missing?" He hesitated, like someone holding in something for too long. "A complete home, a family with a name, and a question I've been waiting to ask with all my heart." Before I could respond, he got down on one knee. Right there, just like that. On the earth, in the silence, in the middle of the garden where our new story was beginning. "Caroline Miller, you showed me what quiet love looks like. You taught me that family is a choice, that home is something we build, and that belonging is the most precious thing we can give. Will you marry me?" The tears came before the words, and with them, a flash of memory. The woman who was once turned away at a bakery for not having 87 cents. Now she was a co-founder of a hotel chain. Now she was someone's home. "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "I will." He stood and embraced me tightly. And there, among the trees and soft lights, with the distant laughter of our team behind us, I realized I was living something that could never be written into contracts. Something that didn't fit into a business plan. It was love. Love built with empathy, with patience, with small, steady gestures. And just a few feet away inside the hotel, Lucy and Abby had already hung a homemade sign that read, "What begins with bread, ends with heart." It was their phrase, but honestly, it could have been the summary of our whole journey. Later that night, just before bed, I received one final surprise. Alexander showed up at the temporary suite holding 2 envelopes. "They asked me to deliver these in person," he said. Each envelope held a drawing. Lucy's showed 4 figures, 2 little girls, a man, and a woman, holding hands in front of a house with blue windows. Abby's had just 3 words, scribbled in her uneven handwriting. Now we're us. And I understood. Even before the wedding license, before the official ceremony, before the signatures, we were already a family. The wedding took place at the First Hearth Hotel's location, not in a banquet hall, nor with grand displays. The ceremony was held in the garden, the very same spot where Alexander had knelt weeks before, where the ground was firm yet alive, where the low-hanging light swayed in the breeze and Abby's sunflowers were just beginning to bloom. We did everything our way, simple, honest, with only those who truly mattered. The decorations were put together by the staff themselves. The florist from the front desk brought vases from his grandmother's backyard. The seamstress who helped out at the hotel stitched my dress using leftover fabric from the curtains in the first suite. Lucy drew the invitations by hand. Abby insisted that instead of throwing rice, we'd toss flower petals. Because rice is food, and food should be respected. There were no tuxedoed groomsmen or professional photographers. There was emotion. There was truth. Alexander waited for me by a small table stacked with books. Because, as he said, our stories deserved to be honored. He wasn't in a suit, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and his familiar, quiet smile. A whole man, grounded, ready. The girls walked in first. Lucy held a sunflower. Abby carried 2 paper hearts with the words "Home" and "Us" written on them. I came after, to the sound of an improvised quartet from the kitchen, staff playing guitar and cajon. My steps were steady, but my heart trembled, knowing that this moment wasn't ordinary. It was sacred. When I reached him, Alexander took my hands with the same calm presence he had always given me. Then he began to speak. "Caroline, one day I saw you apologize for not having enough money to buy a loaf of bread. And in that moment, without knowing why, my heart understood. There was a strength in you the world needed to see. Since then, you've taught me what love without words looks like, what dignity in pain means, what courage in silence feels like. Today, I don't ask you to share a life with me. I offer you mine, all of it, everything I am and everything I've yet to become." I took a deep breath. The tears had already started to fall as I answered. "Alexander, I was raised to ask for little, to accept the minimum, to be grateful for scraps. But you looked at me and saw something I didn't even know was there. You didn't just offer me a future. You gave me a place, a space where I could breathe, grow, belong. Today I don't join you as someone rescued. I join you as someone who's found an equal, someone who walks beside you, with respect, with commitment, with love." We didn't exchange golden rings. Lucy and Abby had made us 2 bracelets out of colorful beads, and it was with those that we sealed our vows. When the words, "You may kiss the bride," were spoken, the girls squealed with joy. Then, they ran to us and wrapped their arms around us tightly, as if they already knew, with their child hearts, that this moment wasn't just about a wedding. It was about founding a home. After the ceremony, we had dinner under the stars, simple dishes, genuine laughter. And in the middle of the toasts and memories, Alexander shared one more decision. "Today, I'm not only a husband, I want to become a father. And I'm formally filing the adoption papers for Lucy and Abby. Not just because I want to, but because I already am. Because they've given me a second chance at life." The girls leapt into his arms. Abby said she wanted to change her last name. Lucy asked if she could start signing her drawings as Harris Miller. That night, time said goodbye to absence. The empty spaces were filled not with luxury, but with truth. In the months that followed, the hotel bloomed even more. We became known not just for hospitality, but as a human-centered model. The media started calling us the most welcoming hotel in the country, but to us it was just an extension of home. Other locations started taking shape. Alexander and I traveled with the girls to meet local communities, talk with people who believed in the mission. At every new site, we weren't trying to expand, we were trying to deepen. The mission of Hearth Hotels was never about growing bigger. It was about belonging, about healing, about reminding people, guests or staff, that they matter. Today, when I look back, I barely recognize the woman who once trembled at the entrance of a bakery. But I never forget her. She was the beginning. She was the seed. And whenever someone asks how it all started, I always reply with the same quiet smile, with a loaf of bread and someone who chose to stay. Because the world doesn't change when we're handed big opportunities. It changes when someone looks us in the eyes and says with presence, "You matter." And I see you. And if today I can say I'm happy, whole, at peace, it's because I finally found the place I'd been searching for all along. A place called us. It was never about the bread. It never was. It was about what that bread meant. About the cold Caroline carried not only in her fingers, but deep in her soul. About the nights she laid next to her daughters, trying to smile, even when the only thing she truly wanted was to cry in silence. It's about the invisible choices that millions of mothers make every single day, eating less so their children can eat, working twice as hard just to afford the bare minimum, smiling in front of their kids, and falling apart after they sleep. But it's also about what happens when someone sees those women, when someone, even with power, with status, with a busy life, chooses to stop, to truly look, to reach out. Alexander didn't save Caroline. He didn't offer charity. He didn't hand her a ready-made solution. He did something far rarer. He saw her. And to really see someone can change everything, because no one can bloom in the shadow of indifference. What happened to Caroline may sound unlikely, and maybe it is, but the heart of this story isn't about a millionaire and a struggling mother. It's about what is born when someone breaks the rhythm of rush and offers their presence. It's about the power of small gestures. A bag left at the door, a glance without judgment, an honest invitation, a moment of real listening. It's about understanding that empathy is not charity. It's a commitment to the human in the other, and the human in ourselves. Because Caroline, even when broken, still gave love. And Alexander, surrounded by everything, still felt empty. They met in that sacred space between pain and dignity, and it was there that they built something money could never buy. Connection, tenderness, home, and the girls, Lucy and Abby. They grew up knowing what many adults forget. That worth doesn't come from a bank account. That real luxury is being treated with respect. And that belonging is the greatest gift you can ever give someone. Maybe you know a Caroline. Maybe you are one. And if you are, know this. You don't need permission to live with truth. You are not alone. And sometimes, in the middle of a bakery, or on a sidewalk, or inside a silent moment, someone might look at you and finally see. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Someone who might be quietly waiting for a glance, a gesture, a new beginning. Here we tell real stories. Stories of pain and healing and dignity and love. Stories like Caroline's. That began without a piece of bread and ended with a home. Subscribe to this channel now and join a growing circle of people who still believe in the power of empathy. Because as long as stories like this exist, we are never truly alone.